So back to Andrew's call, and he brought up, he brought up like 10 or 50 subjects or something like that. But one of them...
Andrew keeps up, man.
He does. One of them was the opioid epidemic. And then, of course, the OxyContin manufacturer has decided they're not going to market OxyContin anymore. And that is an amazing statistic about the millions of pills to the small town.
And I don't remember how many millions of pills Andrew was talking about and how small a town, but I do know this, and I find this to be incredibly interesting. I was reading an article in the New York Times about a month or so ago. If we took all the prescriptions written for opiate-based medication in America today, not just OxyContin, but OxyContin, hydrocodone, you know what I mean, all these opiate-based. And if you think about it, you've got fentanyl, you got heroin, you got all these other things. But when you think of opioids, you need to think of agriculture, weather, and farming. And when you think of fentanyl, what do you think of? You think of synthetics. There's not a process involved as the agrarian product that is opiate. So think of this. Andrew was talking about how many millions of pills were prescribed in a town of how many or how few citizens. If we were to take all the prescriptions written for opiate-based medications in America, every single resident of the United States of America would have a 2-week supply. Listen to this. The average days of opioid use per resident per year in America is 17.4. We have written enough opiate-based medicating prescriptions in this country for you to have a 17.4-day dose, for Alec to have a 17.4-day dose, for me to have a 17.4-day dose. And we always talk about, Friday we were talking about the Community Reinvestment Act. And we talked last week about debt and deficits and when the world blew up in 2008, the Federal Reserve and how they're managing the affairs of our federal government and what their relationship is to the economy and the legislative branch and the executive branch. And Jerome Powell is now Fed chair, taking the place of Janet Yellen. And when you think about what affects and influences the economy, the day I read the beige book of the Federal Reserve and Janet Yellen's comments were verbatim. We worry about the opiate epidemic and its effect on worker productivity. I was taken aback.
It can affect the economy is what she's saying.
Bingo. I went back and read it again, and it's clear as a bell. Janet Yellen said that a lot of her analysis of the economy takes into account this opiate epidemic and how much it'll have to do with worker productivity. That's when I said, wow. I mean, I'd heard some stories. We all heard these stories about, Mike Nunn's been here many, many, many times talking about how people are prescribed opiate-based medication. The prescriptions run out. They go to the black market. They get fentanyl. They become addicted to heroin, and then it's black tar heroin. There's a financial and a socioeconomic component here. But if you really go back, and we went back to the Community Reinvestment Act and how the banks were forced to loan money to individuals who were not creditworthy. We know that to be the case. Now, we could have a year-long debate as to, did they do it too much? Did they take advantage of some of the inexactness of the legislation? And I would argue human beings, when they have a chance to profit a lot or profit a little, most capitalists try to profit a lot. I'll just leave it there. Okay, I think just as similar, I think the federal government was hoodwinked by Big Pharma. I think Big Pharma went to the federal government, the people that write the laws, and said, people are experiencing too much pain in hospitals. We've got a miracle potion. We can help people control their pain. How many of you have been to the hospital recently, or the last 10 years, probably the last 15 years, and you're asked this question? On a scale of 1 to 10, what is your pain? 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever. Okay, I believe, got fairly substantial and professional opinions that tell me a lot of that was because there was a group of Big Pharma who had these advanced prescription painkillers that they needed people to be prescribed. And when you go to the hospital and they say, what's your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? It's a 4. What do? Write you a script, give you a pill. It's a 5, it's a 6, it's a 7, it's an 8. I've got a friend who went to the hospital with pneumonia, had a bad cold, thought he had the flu, ended up with pneumonia about 3 or 4 years ago. Ends up at the hospital for about 5 or 6 days. I mean, he is deathly ill. They come in the room and ask him, what is your pain on a scale of 1 to 10? He says, I feel like crap. I got pneumonia, man. My temperature's 103. It's an 8. I don't know how I could feel much worse than this. You know what they did? They gave him an opiate-based painkiller for pneumonia. That makes no sense. And I think we have gone down the road, and well, I don't think this, and this is a very non-professional but somewhat informed opinion. I think we have created a generation of dependency on painkillers. And I think when you go through the numbers that Andrew was talking about, I'm familiar with some of those stories. We've got these pain, quote unquote, air quotes, radio's not visual, and I get that, these pain management centers. We've got these places in strip malls that scare the daylights out of me, and they're called pain management centers, and people go in there saying, my back hurts. How do you prove somebody's back hurts or not? And they're going there to get written a script, and they want that script to be some kind of opiate-based medication. There's an underground economy. There's an economy of people who get Medicaid. Guess what they do? They get written a prescription for OxyContin or some other sort of opiate-based medication. They sell it to somebody for $5 a pill. That person sells it for $30 or $35 a pill. There's an incredible black market of these sorts of medications on the street, and it's leading to the decimating of a generation of Americans. And if you don't believe, when the Federal Reserve in its minutes offering commentary on the state of the economy, when they believe one of the major headwinds in worker productivity is everybody's hooked to some sort of medication. You watch Live PD a lot. I watched it a little bit Saturday night. If you are caught with marijuana, they write you a ticket and say, don't do that anymore. They're looking for people who have illegitimate prescription drugs. Mm-hmm. And how many people do they come across in those 2 hours on Saturday night who have some sort of painkiller that they have no business with? And Purdue Pharmaceuticals in about 1986 introduced a painkiller called OxyContin. They told the federal government and the FDA it's not addictive. And while they were doing this, they lobbied some people within the federal government to come up with this scale of 1 to 10, what is your pain tolerance? And they started writing prescriptions. And I've done enough research on this to be a little bit dangerous. The opiate basically confuses the receptors in the brain, and it's incredibly addictive. And I think the pharmaceutical companies like Purdue Pharmaceutical, they're one of the wealthiest families in America now. They went public. They made a bunch of money. I don't know how many OxyContins have been prescribed in the United States of America. I mean, it would scare the daylights out of you to know how many people, and once again, to Mike Nunn's point, the OxyContin leads to you can't get your prescription anymore, so what do? You go find somebody who is sleazy and slimy enough to take 5 or 6 people who get Medicaid to a pain management center. The person at the pain management center writes a prescription. They go to the pharmacy, get that medicine. They never take the medicine because they really aren't hurt. There's really nothing wrong with their back, but they get a certain cut of the profits. The person keeps those pills at his house. Somebody who can't get that medication because for whatever reason the doctor's discontinued the prescription, they're already hooked. I mean, they're addicted. They are absolutely, totally addicted to this pain medication. They end up in some town somewhere, parked in somebody's driveway with folding cash money in their hand. The person got the pills as a result of carrying an SUV full of people to a pain management center. They've got the benefits of Medicaid and the benefits of Medicare. They get those pills, the dealer, because that's all they are is a dealer. The drug dealer gives them $5 per pill. They sell them for $25 or $30, and it creates this enormous underground economy. And the cheaper alternative is black tar heroin and fentanyl. And it's a vicious cycle. It knows no racial bounds. It knows no ethnic bounds. It knows no socioeconomic bounds. It is an incredible problem in the American economy and American society. And I have no idea why Purdue announced over the weekend what they did announce. But this morning, about half their sales staff is being done away with. And it's the half sales staff that goes to doctor practices and doctor facilities and say, hey, we need you to write prescriptions for this particular drug because it is a wonderful way to manage someone's chronic pain. And I don't doubt that. I mean, I don't doubt that it doesn't do a great job of managing the pain, but it's created a dependency at an epidemic in America that so few people are really aware of. Now, I know now there are certain class action lawsuits and civil litigations to be had. Purdue may be getting ready, for this enormous onslaught of litigation that's coming their way. They've got an enormous amount of resources. I'm sure they have top flight attorneys. And at the end of the day, they'll probably say, we never intended for people to become addicted to a drug. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they didn't. But I believe on the front end, they misrepresented how incredibly addictive this medication is, and how opiate at its core is to confuse the sensors of the brain. And I've read statistic after statistic, research paper after research paper, and it is unfathomable to me how these pharmaceutical companies didn't know exactly what they were doing. They knew damn well these drugs were incredibly addictive. They knew damn well if they got somebody a prescription written, odds were they would become dependent upon the managing of that pain, because they knew the science of the drug was to confuse and crosswire and short circuit the receptors in the brain. And they knew the adverse effect. They knew the dependency they could create. A little bit of me, this is very cynical, very judgmental. Forgive me. They made enough money. They finally made enough money. And now they're going to take half their sales staff off the road because they realize the problems, not just them. It's not just Purdue. There's several variations of these opiate-based medications. But when I saw that story, I said, wow. And I'm not saying it's immoral. I'm certainly not saying it's immoral. I'm saying that to suggest that there was no danger and to not make aware of the consumer the addictive nature of this drug is something that Big Pharma should be absolutely ashamed of and embarrassed to be a part of. But the checks cleared the bank. The profits went through the roof. And I believe the federal government was in on the game when Big Pharma lobbied Washington into convincing hospitals and healthcare providers, let's do this scale of 1 to 10. My friend has pneumonia, and they give him an opiate-based pain medication. Makes no sense. None. But I've always told you, Rev, you want to find out what's going on? What do?
Follow the money.
Follow the money. It'll lead you to the right place every single time. Back in a minute. Good morning, PD, Live 95.